My name is Noelle Walker, 28 years old, and I just received a letter that made my hands shake uncontrollably. 6 years ago, my parents kicked me out for choosing art school over medical school, leaving me homeless with nothing but my sketchbook and determination. I thought that was the worst they could do to me, but this envelope in my hands proves they had one more knife to twist. Before I share what this letter contains, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned this betrayal into my greatest strength. I come from what most people would call medical royalty. My father, Dr. Thomas Walker, is a renowned surgeon whose hands have saved hundreds of lives. My mother, Dr. Margaret Walker, is a respected neurologist whose research on brain trauma is taught in medical schools across the country. My older brother James followed the family tradition, becoming a successful radiologist before his 30th birthday. 3 generations of Walkers have practiced medicine, with our family name appearing on hospital wings and medical journal publications. Growing up in our affluent Boston neighborhood, I was surrounded by constant reminders of our family legacy. Our bookshelves overflowed with medical textbooks rather than novels. Dinner conversations revolved around complex surgeries and patient cases instead of normal family topics. Weekend activities often included accompanying my parents to hospital fundraisers, where they would proudly introduce James as the next brilliant Walker doctor. I was usually mentioned as an afterthought, the youngest who would surely follow the same path. Despite this overwhelming medical atmosphere, art found its way into my life through our kind nanny, Mrs. Bennett. She noticed my fascination with colors and shapes when I was just 5 years old and secretly encouraged my passion. While my parents were working long hospital shifts, she would bring me art supplies and teach me basic techniques. "You have a gift, little one," she would whisper as I created colorful worlds on paper. "Different from your parents, but special in its own way." Those moments with Mrs. Bennett became my sanctuary. I learned to hide my art supplies under my bed and between my mattresses. I would sketch late at night after finishing my advanced science homework, creating beautiful images by flashlight. When my parents would burst into my room, I would quickly shove drawings under textbooks, pretending to be studying cellular biology or organic chemistry. Every summer, while my friends attended regular camps with swimming and horseback riding, I was sent to academic programs designed to prepare me for a future in medicine. "These connections will be valuable when you apply to medical school," my father would say as he dropped me off, never noticing my red eyes from crying the night before. Meanwhile, James thrived in these environments, coming home with awards and recommendations from program directors. Despite the pressure, I excelled academically. I maintained a perfect GPA, took all advanced placement science courses, and participated in science competitions. On paper, I was the ideal pre-med student, but internally, a different passion burned brighter with each passing year. The more my parents pushed me toward medicine, the more I fell in love with art. The contrast between harsh fluorescent hospital lights and the soft, colorful world I created on canvas became the perfect metaphor for my divided life. When I turned 16, I secretly submitted a painting to a statewide art competition and won first place. The local newspaper featured my work, and for a brief moment, I thought my parents might finally see my true calling. Instead, my father glanced at the article and said, "Nice hobby, Noelle. Now get back to your chemistry project. That scholarship application is due next week." My mother simply added, "Art is a wonderful distraction, dear, but not a career for someone with your potential." Senior year brought intense pressure as application season approached. My parents had already mapped out my entire future: Harvard undergraduate, followed by Harvard Medical School, then a prestigious residency at Massachusetts General Hospital, ideally in neurosurgery or cardiology. Every conversation revolved around which Ivy League schools would best position me for top medical programs. Meanwhile, I was secretly researching art schools and building a portfolio with the help of my high school art teacher, Mr. Daniels, who recognized my talent and encouraged me to pursue it. During this tumultuous time, I met Tyler at a coffee shop near school. He was studying architecture at Boston University and noticed me sketching in my notebook. Unlike everyone else in my life, Tyler saw my art first before knowing anything about my family. "Your work has such precision and emotion at the same time," he said during our first conversation. "It's like you understand both the science and soul of what you're drawing." Those words resonated deeply because he had seen the true me, not the medical prodigy my parents had manufactured. Tyler became my support system as I navigated the increasingly difficult double life. He encouraged me to apply to art schools, helped me photograph my portfolio when I had no professional equipment, and reminded me that I deserved to pursue my own dreams. "Your life belongs to you, Noelle," he would say when I doubted myself. "Not to your family name or legacy." With his encouragement, I found the courage to apply to both the medical schools my parents expected and the art schools that called to my heart. The acceptance letters arrived within days of each other. Harvard's prestigious pre-med program wanted me just as my parents had always planned. But so did Rhode Island School of Design, offering me a partial scholarship after reviewing my portfolio. Holding both letters in my hands, I felt the weight of my entire future pressing down on me. The expected path laid out since birth versus the uncertain road that made my heart race with excitement. For weeks, I barely slept, imagining both potential lives unfolding before me. In one future, I saw myself in white coats and sterile environments, respected but hollow inside. In the other, I stood in paint-spattered clothes in a sun-filled studio, creating work that moved people emotionally rather than physically healing them. Both paths would help people, but only one would allow me to be whole. I practiced the conversation countless times in my head and with Tyler. We rehearsed potential responses to my parents' arguments. "Medicine gives stability that art cannot provide," they would surely say. "Our connections have paved this path for you," would be another argument. "The Walker name has opened doors you cannot imagine," would inevitably follow. For each anticipated objection, I prepared thoughtful responses, hoping rational discussion might bridge our different visions. On a Friday evening in May, I gathered my courage and called a family dinner to announce my decision. I spent the afternoon cooking my parents' favorite meal, setting the table with our best dishes, even buying flowers to create a positive atmosphere. As we sat down to eat, my brother James sensed my nervous energy and raised an eyebrow questioningly. I took a deep breath and placed both acceptance letters on the table. "I have something important to discuss with you all." I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. "I've been accepted to both Harvard and Rhode Island School of Design. After careful consideration, I've decided to pursue my passion for art at RISD." The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at me as though I had suddenly started speaking an alien language. The color drained from my mother's face as her fork clattered against her plate. James looked down, avoiding eye contact entirely. When my father finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm, which was far more terrifying than yelling would have been. "This is obviously a joke in very poor taste, Noelle. We've invested 18 years preparing you for medical school. This is not up for discussion." "Dad, I know this isn't what you planned, but art is what I love. I can make a good living as an artist and designer." "The program at RISD is world-class, and they're offering me a scholarship based on my portfolio." I pushed the RISD letter toward him, which he refused to touch as though it might contaminate him. My mother began crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she shook her head. "Where did we go wrong? How could you throw away everything we've built for you? Do you know how many girls would kill for the opportunities you're so carelessly discarding?" I had expected disappointment, but the cold rage emanating from my father and the manipulative tears from my mother still caught me off guard. What hurt most, however, was James' silence. My brother, who had always protected me when we were children, who knew better than anyone the pressure our parents placed on us, said nothing in my defense. When I looked to him for support, he finally spoke. "Noelle, don't be ridiculous. You can't throw away a Harvard acceptance for some art school. Mom and Dad are right. You're not thinking clearly." His betrayal cut deeper than my parents' reaction because I had foolishly expected him to understand. Over the next 2 weeks, my parents employed every psychological tactic possible to change my mind. They invited family friends who were doctors to dinner to talk sense into me. My father's colleague, Dr. Simmons, lectured me for an hour about job security and the fickle nature of the art world. My mother's friend from medical school brought her daughter, who had wasted 2 years at art school before coming to her senses, to share cautionary tales. My parents scheduled a Harvard campus tour without telling me, simply announcing one morning that I needed to be ready in an hour. During the tour, they spoke to professors about their daughter the incoming pre-med student, while I stood silently mortified. On the drive home, my father talked incessantly about the research opportunities available to undergraduates, completely ignoring my repeated statements that I would not be attending. The guilt trips intensified daily. "After all we've sacrificed for your education," my mother would say over breakfast. "Think of your grandfather's legacy," my father would remind me before bed. "You have a responsibility to use the gifts you've been given," became their constant refrain, as though artistic talent wasn't also a gift. The final confrontation came 3 weeks after my announcement. My deposit for RISD was due the following day, and I had the check ready to mail. My father saw the envelope addressed to the art school and exploded. "If you mail that check, you are choosing to throw away everything this family stands for," he shouted, his face turning alarming shades of red. "We will not support this foolish rebellion." "It's not a rebellion, Dad. It's my life, my future. I need to follow my own path." My voice trembled but held firm. "Then you can do it without our support," he said coldly. "If you choose this art school over Harvard, you can pay for it yourself. No tuition, no housing, no expenses. And you won't be living under this roof while you waste your potential." My mother, instead of calming the situation, nodded in agreement. "You have 2 weeks to come to your senses, Noelle. Otherwise, you need to find somewhere else to live." As they walked away, I stood frozen in our living room, the RISD envelope clutched in my shaking hand. I had anticipated anger and disappointment, but never imagined they would actually disown me over my choice of college. The 2 weeks that followed were excruciating. My parents treated me like a ghost in our home, speaking around me rather than to me. Dinner conversations excluded me entirely as they discussed hospital matters with James while I sat in silence. My mother would sigh loudly whenever I entered a room while my father avoided eye contact completely. I began packing my belongings, still hoping they might relent as the deadline approached. Each item I placed in boxes felt like another piece of my childhood being wrapped away. The sketchbooks hidden under my bed, the art supplies concealed in old science fair project boxes, the few art books I'd managed to collect over the years. With each passing day, the reality that I would actually have to leave became more concrete. The morning of my departure, I woke early to find my art supplies dumped in the trash can outside. My mother had gone through my remaining boxes while I slept and removed anything related to my misguided choice. Standing over the garbage can in my pajamas, I fished out brushes, paints, and half-finished canvases, some now damaged beyond repair. As I carried my salvaged art supplies back inside, my mother stepped into the hallway. Her expression wasn't angry, but something worse, a mixture of disappointment and dismissal, as though I were no longer worthy of genuine emotion. "When you fail and I give you 6 months before reality hits, don't come crawling back," she said flatly. "Actions have consequences, Noelle. This is a lesson you apparently need to learn the hard way." My father appeared behind her, keys in hand. "I'll be changing the locks this afternoon," he informed me as if discussing a routine home maintenance task. "Make sure you take everything you need." As I finished packing the few boxes they were allowing me to take, I noticed my phone notification that my number had been blocked from their phones. The systematic way they were erasing me from their lives was breathtaking in its efficiency. Not once did they ask where I would go or how I would survive. The daughter who refused medicine simply ceased to exist in their world. With nowhere else to turn, I called Tyler. He immediately offered his couch while I figured out my next steps. For 3 weeks, I slept in his living room trying to be invisible to his 3 roommates, who made it increasingly clear they hadn't signed up for a 4th person in their apartment. Their growing resentment added another layer of shame to my already overwhelming situation. The financial reality of my decision hit hard and fast. Without my parents' support, I needed to cover not only tuition and books, but also basic survival. I found work at a coffee shop near campus for morning shifts, waited tables at a diner for evening hours, and stocked shelves at a grocery store on weekends. Between the 3 jobs, I barely managed to cover a security deposit on the smallest, most rundown apartment I could find 30 minutes from campus. Applying for student loans without parental co-signers proved nearly impossible for a freshman with no credit history. The financial aid office looked at me with pitying expressions as they explained that my parents' income still counted against me despite their refusal to contribute. "You might consider taking a year off to establish independence," one advisor suggested, gently, not understanding that going back home wasn't an option. My first semester became a blur of exhaustion, hunger, and doubt. I would rush from morning classes to work shifts, then back to evening studios, often going entire days, eating nothing but the free pastries the coffee shop allowed employees to take at closing. I lost weight rapidly, my clothes hanging loose on my frame as weeks passed. One particularly difficult day, after learning my ancient laptop couldn't run the design software required for a major project, I broke down completely in a campus bathroom. Sitting on the floor of a stall, I sobbed uncontrollably, questioning every choice that had led me to this moment. Perhaps my parents had been right. Perhaps I was being foolishly idealistic, thinking I could make it as an artist. The practicality of medicine suddenly seemed less suffocating than this daily struggle to survive. It was Professor Winters who found me there, hearing my muffled cries as she entered the restroom. Instead of awkwardly retreating, she knocked gently on the stall door. "Whoever's in there, I'm a good listener if you need one," she offered. Something in her voice, its genuine warmth without pity, made me unlock the door. Professor Winters didn't ask questions initially, just sat beside me on the cold tile floor, a 60-something woman in elegant clothes, completely unconcerned about propriety. When I finally managed to share my situation between hiccuping sobs, she nodded thoughtfully. "The most talented students are often the ones facing the greatest obstacles," she said. "Art requires resilience, Noelle, perhaps more than medicine ever would have." That conversation marked a turning point. Professor Winters helped me apply for emergency school funding, allowed me to use her office computer for projects, and occasionally left grocery store gift cards in my student mailbox, always with notes about art supply reimbursement to protect my dignity. She never mentioned my parents or suggested I reconcile with them, recognizing that some bridges cannot and should not be rebuilt. My work schedule remained punishing. Overnight shifts at the diner left me sleeping through morning alarms and struggling to stay awake during critiques. The apartment I could barely afford had unreliable heating, leaving me working under blankets during winter months when temperatures dropped. On weekends, I would sit in the public park with a small display of sketches selling quick portraits to tourists for extra cash that usually went immediately to overdue bills. Throughout that first year, I made periodic attempts to reach my family. I sent birthday cards that received no acknowledgement. I left voicemails on holidays that were never returned. I emailed updates about my academic achievements, earning nothing but digital silence. The most painful discovery came through a distant cousin who mentioned casually that my parents had told extended family I was going through a phase and would eventually return to my senses. They hadn't even acknowledged my actual choice or success in my chosen field, instead crafting a narrative that painted me as temporarily wayward rather than purposefully independent. As my second year of art school began, I made a conscious decision to channel all my energy into my work, rather than the family who had abandoned me. If I couldn't have their emotional support, I would at least make sure my sacrifice was worthwhile by becoming the best artist possible. I began developing a distinctive style that ironically drew from my medical background. Years of studying anatomical drawings and biological structures gave my work a precision uncommon among my peers. I combined this technical accuracy with emotional depth that professors noted as unusually mature. "Your work shows understanding of both body and spirit," Professor Winters noted during a critique. "Perhaps your journey between two worlds has given you a unique perspective." During a local art fair where student work was displayed, I met Sarah Goldstein, owner of a small but respected gallery in Providence. She stopped in front of my anatomical heart series, unusual paintings that showed physically accurate hearts surrounded by visual representations of emotional states. "These are remarkable," she said, studying the details. "The medical precision combined with emotional symbolism creates powerful tension. Would you be interested in showing a few pieces in a group exhibition I'm planning?" That small opportunity, 3 drawings hung in the back of a gallery featuring 15 emerging artists, became my first step into the professional art world. Though none of my pieces sold, several visitors requested my contact information, and one local arts writer mentioned my distinctive medical emotional aesthetic in a brief review. While building my artistic identity, I also found myself constructing a new kind of family. My classmates Jasmine, Diego, and Kai became my inner circle, supporting each other through critiques, celebrating small victories, and providing couches to crash on when financial circumstances became dire. We shared meals, art supplies, and the unspoken understanding that art was not just our education, but our survival. Unlike my biological family, they never questioned the validity of my path or suggested practical alternatives to creative pursuit. My graduation ceremony highlighted the stark reality of my situation. While other students posed for photos with proud parents holding bouquets, I stood alone in my cap and gown. Professor Winters discreetly took a few photos of me receiving my diploma later, framing one for my apartment as a reminder of what I had accomplished despite every obstacle. The absence of family faces in the audience stung, but I had stopped expecting them to materialize in my life years ago. With diploma in hand but uncertain prospects ahead, I accepted Jasmine's invitation to share a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. New York offered more opportunities for emerging artists, though the competition was also significantly fiercer. We packed my few possessions and her slightly larger collection into her brother's pickup truck and headed to a fifth-floor walk-up in Bushwick, with perpetually inconsistent water pressure and neighbors who argued in multiple languages at all hours. To pay rent while establishing myself artistically, I secured a junior position at a graphic design firm specializing in medical publications. The irony wasn't lost on me that my medical background actually provided an advantage in this niche design field. I could understand and visualize complex procedures in ways other designers couldn't, creating illustrations that doctors found intuitive and accurate. During days, I designed surgical technique brochures and anatomical educational materials. Nights and weekends, I created the personal work that increasingly defined my artistic voice. My tiny desk by the apartment's only window became my studio space. With limited resources, I developed techniques using affordable materials in innovative ways. My online portfolio gradually gained attention in certain art circles, particularly among those interested in work exploring bodily experience and emotional states. A small online magazine featured my series on physical manifestations of emotional wounds, leading to my first solo exhibition at a cafe gallery in Williamsburg. Throughout this period, Tyler and I maintained contact, though his medical school schedule and my chaotic work life made regular communication challenging. Unlike my family, he had supported my decision from the beginning, even when it meant our relationship had to evolve into something long distance and less defined. During his rare breaks from studies, he would visit New York, sleeping on our lumpy couch and accompanying me to gallery openings. "I'm so proud of what you're building," he would say, looking at new work in my makeshift studio space. "You were right to follow this path." The emotional damage of family estrangement required its own kind of treatment. Through a community program offering sliding scale fees, I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, Dr. Larson helped me understand that grief for living family can sometimes be more complicated than mourning the dead. "They're simultaneously present and absent in your life," she explained. "That creates a unique kind of pain that needs acknowledgement." Through therapy and support groups for others experiencing family estrangement, I slowly began processing the complex emotions I had suppressed while focusing on basic survival. The anger that sometimes exploded unexpectedly, the sadness that ambushed me when I saw parents helping their adult children move into apartments, the lingering feeling of defectiveness that whispered I must be fundamentally flawed for my own parents to discard me so easily. My breakthrough came through my art rather than therapy directly. I created a series of 12 large canvases titled Excision that visually processed the surgical removal of family from my life. The technical precision of medical imagery combined with raw emotional symbolism created work that resonated deeply with viewers. When the series was exhibited at a small but well-respected gallery, a prominent collector purchased the entire collection, the first significant financial validation of my artistic path. As my professional reputation grew incrementally in New York's competitive art scene, I discovered that my unusual background actually provided a compelling narrative that helped distinguish my work. The contrast between my medical family legacy and my chosen artistic path created a tension that critics found intriguing. One review noted, Walker's work exists at the intersection of clinical observation and emotional excavation, perhaps informed by her own migration from medical legacy to artistic innovation. 3 years after graduation, my career reached an important inflection point with my exhibition, Surgical Precision. The collection featured 20 mixed media pieces examining how emotional experiences are inscribed on our physical bodies. Using my knowledge of anatomy and surgical techniques as visual vocabulary, I created work that one critic described as technically flawless, yet emotionally devastating, a rare combination in contemporary art. The medical knowledge that my parents had forced upon me throughout childhood ironically became my artistic signature. My ability to render anatomical structures with absolute accuracy while infusing them with emotional resonance set my work apart in a crowded field. Gallery visitors would often ask about my medical background, assuming I must have formal training to depict biological systems with such fidelity. The truth that I had absorbed this knowledge through familial osmosis rather than personal choice became part of my artistic origin story. 6 months after Surgical Precision opened, I was featured in a major art magazine with national distribution. The 4-page spread included photos of my work and studio, along with an interview discussing my unique approach to connecting physical and emotional experience through art. Without mentioning my parents directly, the article noted my background in a medical family and how I had chosen a different path of healing through visual expression. I knew the magazine was read by many in medical academic circles. My parents' colleagues would almost certainly see it. For the first time, I felt a certain vindication that my rebellion had led to recognition in my chosen field. My growing professional success gradually translated to improved financial stability. After 3 years of barely scraping by, I could finally afford a better apartment with actual studio space separate from my bedroom. I no longer needed to choose between art supplies and groceries each month. The constant anxiety about basic survival began to recede, allowing me to focus more fully on creative development rather than mere existence. Throughout this evolution, my relationship with Tyler continued to deepen, despite the challenges of his medical residency schedule. Unlike my parents, Tyler never saw art and medicine as opposing forces, but rather complementary approaches to understanding human experience. We're both trying to help people through different means, he would say. You heal through visual truth, I heal through medical intervention. His perspective helped me reconcile the medical influences in my work without feeling I was somehow betraying my chosen path. My ongoing therapy journey helped me establish healthier patterns in all relationships. Dr. Larson guided me through examining how family abandonment had created fear of rejection that sometimes manifested as people-pleasing or conflict avoidance. The way your parents conditioned their love on your career choice has affected how you perceive all relationship dynamics, she observed. Through consistent work, I began recognizing and reshaping these patterns, building connections based on mutual respect rather than performance or compliance. Establishing boundaries with extended family proved particularly challenging. Well-meaning aunts, uncles, and cousins periodically attempted to broker peace between my parents and me, not understanding that reconciliation requires willingness from both sides. Your parents miss you, my Aunt Susan claimed during one holiday call, though she couldn't explain why they never responded to any of my attempts at contact. I learned to politely but firmly state that I remained open to communication, but would not apologize for my legitimate life choices simply to regain family approval. The most difficult moment came during my cousin Jennifer's wedding 3 years after being disowned. I knew my parents would attend but decided to go anyway, refusing to miss important family events due to their rejection. Seeing them across the church, my mother in elegant blue silk, and my father still commanding respect with his distinguished appearance, sent a physical shock through my system. They acknowledged me with cold formal nods, but maintained distance throughout the event, speaking to me only when social protocol absolutely demanded it. My brother James, now completing his radiology fellowship, seemed uncomfortable in the middle, making brief conversation while constantly glancing toward our parents for approval. As I rebuilt my life without biological family support, I found myself creating new traditions and celebrations with chosen family. Thanksgivings became potluck gatherings in Jasmine's slightly larger apartment, with artists, designers, and assorted creative friends contributing dishes and impromptu performances. Christmas evolved into a gift exchange focused on handmade items rather than expensive presents, celebrating creativity over consumption. Birthdays were marked with small but meaningful gatherings where genuine connection replaced obligatory attendance. A pivotal moment in my healing journey came during an artist's retreat in upstate New York. Surrounded by creative people from diverse backgrounds, all pursuing their authentic paths, I experienced a sense of belonging I'd never felt even within my biological family. During a group discussion about creative influences, I shared my story of family rejection for the first time in a public setting. The supportive responses and similar stories from others helped dissolve the lingering shame I'd carried. Families that require you to be someone you're not aren't actually offering love, said one older sculptor, whose words resonated deeply. They're offering conditional approval, which is something else entirely. As my reputation grew, I began receiving invitations to speak at art schools about developing authentic creative voices. These opportunities allowed me to mentor younger artists, particularly those facing family opposition to their chosen path. Seeing their relief when I shared my journey from rejection to professional success confirmed that my experience, though painful, could serve as reassurance for others facing similar challenges. If your work comes from an authentic place, I would tell them, it will find its audience even without traditional support systems. The financial stability of my artistic practice increased significantly when I developed an online course teaching my unique techniques for anatomical drawing combined with emotional expression. The course attracted medical illustrators seeking more evocative approaches, artists wanting to improve technical accuracy, and even medical students looking to develop more empathetic visual understanding of patient experiences. The irony that I was now teaching aspects of medical knowledge through an artistic lens felt like the perfect integration of my complicated background. On a Tuesday morning in September, my life had settled into a fulfilling routine. I woke early to work on a commission for a medical school that had ironically asked me to create a series of artworks for their new student wellness center. After answering emails and reviewing teaching materials for my online course, I headed downstairs to check my mail before meeting Jasmine for lunch. Among the usual mix of bills and art supply catalogs sat an envelope with handwriting I instantly recognized despite 6 years of absence. My father's precise angular script with its characteristic slant from years of writing patient notes. My name and address written in blue ink. The envelope itself, heavy cream stationery my mother had always preferred for important correspondence. My hands began trembling immediately, my heart racing so intensely I had to lean against the wall next to the mailboxes. The physical reaction surprised me with its intensity, a visceral response to seeing tangible evidence of parents who had existed only in memory for years. 6 years of silence broken by this unexpected rectangular presence in my mailbox. I carried the envelope upstairs without opening it, placing it on my kitchen counter, as though it might contain something volatile. For several minutes, I simply stared at it, afraid of both its contents and my reaction to them. 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. Perhaps one of them was ill and reaching out before it was too late. Maybe they'd seen my recent museum exhibition and finally recognized the legitimacy of my path. Or most tantalizing of all, perhaps this was the long-awaited apology, the acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. Unable to face the contents alone, I called Tyler and Jasmine. While waiting for them to arrive, I paced my apartment, alternating between hope that healing might finally be possible and fear that whatever lay inside would simply reopen old wounds. The envelope sat untouched on the counter simultaneously, a potential bridge to reconciliation and a possible weapon of further rejection. When my support system arrived, we sat at my kitchen table staring at the envelope. Whatever it contains, remember that your worth isn't determined by their assessment, Jasmine reminded me, squeezing my hand. Tyler nodded in agreement. You've built an amazing life without them, Noelle. Nothing in that envelope changes what you've accomplished. With trembling fingers, I finally broke the seal and unfolded the letter within. The first thing that struck me was its formal tone, more like correspondence between business associates than family members. Dear Noel. It began without any warm opening or acknowledgement of the years of silence. As I read further, confusion gave way to a cold realization. They weren't writing to reconcile or even to acknowledge my achievements. The letter explained in clinical language that my brother James and his wife were expecting their first child. My parents were writing because, as they stated, family medical history has become relevant. The letter continued with detached precision, requesting I complete the enclosed medical history questionnaire focusing on heritable conditions. They explained that while they had respected my chosen distance from the family, a complete reversal of reality, they felt obligated to gather complete medical information for their grandchild's benefit. More shocking than this revisionist history was the paragraph that followed. We have, of course, followed your career through appropriate professional channels, they wrote. While we continue to believe your decision to abandon your medical education was ill-advised and emotionally driven, we acknowledge you have achieved a certain level of recognition in your chosen field. The deliberate diminishment of my success, a certain level of recognition, when I had recently been featured in the country's leading art publication and had work acquired by 2 major museums, revealed they remained unchanged. But the most painful section came near the end. Our concerns about genetic predisposition toward impulsivity and emotional decision-making have been heightened by the impending arrival of our grandchild, my father wrote in his characteristic, precise handwriting. Your pattern of rebellion against practical considerations suggests potential neurological variations that should be documented in family medical records. In a postscript that felt like a final twist of the knife, my mother had added, we remain open to communication should you eventually grow into a more mature understanding of family obligation and professional responsibility. The enclosed medical questionnaire, printed on official hospital stationery, contained 8 pages of detailed questions about everything from allergies to psychological conditions. Not once in the letter did they ask how I was, what my life was like, or express any genuine interest in me as a person, rather than a genetic contributor to their grandchild. As I processed the letter's contents, another painful realization emerged. Through casual references in the text, I discovered they had instructed James never to contact me independently, centralizing all family communication through them. The brother I had once been close to had allowed himself to become their proxy, even in matters as significant as his first child. More devastating than what the letter said was what it revealed: my parents were actually worse than the memory I had preserved. In the years of separation, I had sometimes wondered if I had exaggerated their coldness, if perhaps grief and hurt had colored my recollections. This letter confirmed that my memories had, if anything, been charitable. The clinical detachment, the subtle undermining of my achievements, and the continued psychological manipulation showed a level of emotional cruelty I hadn't fully acknowledged even in therapy. After reading the letter, I experienced a complete emotional collapse, more intense than anything since the initial eviction 6 years earlier. I sank to my kitchen floor, sobbing uncontrollably as Tyler and Jasmine sat beside me in silent support. The carefully constructed strength I had built over years seemed to disintegrate in moments, leaving me feeling like that terrified 22-year-old girl again, facing a world without family safety net. I thought I was over this, I managed between sobs. I thought I had moved past needing their approval or even their acknowledgement. Why does this still hurt so much? Tyler and Jasmine stayed with me the entire day, clearing their schedules to ensure I wouldn't face this new wound alone. They ordered food I couldn't eat, made tea I couldn't drink, and simply remained present as I cycled through rage, grief, and shocking vulnerability. By evening, exhaustion replaced active emotional response, leaving me hollow-eyed and drained on my living room couch. I think I need to process this through my work, I finally said as darkness fell outside my apartment windows. It's the only way I know how to make sense of this kind of pain. The next morning, I called to cancel my scheduled commitments and set up an emergency appointment with my therapist. Then I entered my studio space and began what would become the most cathartic creative period of my career. Using the actual letter as a physical starting point, I created a multimedia series processing this final betrayal. I shredded portions of their words and incorporated them into layered compositions. I projected their handwriting onto canvases and painted over it with images of growth and resilience. I transformed their clinical questionnaire into paper sculptures representing the weight of genetic legacy versus personal choice. Dr. Larson helped me understand that despite my professional success and personal growth, I had still harbored a small hope for eventual reconciliation. That hope, however unlikely it seemed, allowed you to avoid fully grieving the loss of your family relationship, she explained. This letter has forced you to confront the reality that they remain unchanged, which requires a different kind of acceptance than you've previously developed. Our sessions focused on acknowledging that I had unconsciously continued seeking parental approval through achievement, hoping that enough success might eventually make them recognize the validity of my choices. Even when we consciously reject someone's standards, we can unconsciously still measure ourselves against them, Dr. Larson noted. True freedom comes when their measuring stick no longer matters at all. This insight sparked a profound realization I had been creating exceptional work, partly driven by a subliminal desire to prove my parents wrong. While this motivation had fueled my dedication, it had also kept me tethered to their judgment. True artistic liberation would come only when I created solely for myself and the intrinsic value of the work, without reference to their opinions. The therapeutic process coincided with creating my new exhibition. I titled it, Return to Sender, directly addressing family rejection through visual metaphor rather than explicit narrative. The centerpiece was a large installation incorporating actual fragments of their letter preserved under resin and surrounded by anatomically correct representations of healing tissue, a visual meditation on how wounds close but leave permanent marks. When the exhibition opened at a well-respected Chelsea gallery, the response exceeded all expectations. Art critics praised its emotional authenticity and technical sophistication. Visitors lingered longest at pieces that incorporated text from the letter, though I had carefully excluded any identifying information. Many left comments about being moved to tears, often sharing their own experiences of family rejection or conditional love. The show's unexpected success created opportunities I hadn't anticipated. A curator from the Whitney Museum included 2 pieces in a group exhibition on family dynamics in contemporary art. A prominent online art platform featured an interview where I discussed using personal trauma as creative catalyst. Several universities invited me to speak about art as healing practice for psychological wounds. Most surprisingly, the exhibition facilitated healing beyond my own. Numerous visitors contacted me with stories of family estrangement, many expressing how seeing their experience represented artistically helped them process their own pain. A support group for people estranged from family asked permission to use images from the exhibition in their materials. The private wound had become a source of connection and collective healing. Amidst this professional breakthrough, I received an unexpected email from my brother James. Apparently, he had seen reviews of the exhibition online and recognized our family dynamics in the descriptions, though I had never identified them explicitly. His message was tentative but seemed genuine. I've been thinking about you and wondering if we might talk sometime. Becoming a parent has made me question many family patterns I previously accepted. After careful consideration and discussion with my therapist, I agreed to meet James at a cafe halfway between his suburban home and my New York apartment. Our first face-to-face conversation in years was initially awkward, filled with careful small talk and cautious questions. Gradually, as cups of coffee were refilled, something of our childhood connection reemerged. "I should have defended you," he finally said, staring into his cup rather than meeting my eyes. I knew how suffocating their expectations were. I felt it too. But I was afraid of losing their approval if I supported your choice. His honesty opened space for real dialogue about our shared childhood and the different paths we had chosen, one conforming to family expectations, one breaking free of them. Without attacking our parents directly, I helped James recognize patterns of manipulation and conditional love that had shaped both our lives. They can only control you if you value their approval more than your own integrity. I explained sharing wisdom hard-won through years of therapy and self-reflection. as James prepared for fatherhood, he became increasingly concerned about perpetuating these patterns with his own child. Our conversations expanded to include his wife Amy, who had her own observations about my parents' controlling behaviors during wedding planning and early marriage. Together, they made the difficult decision to establish boundaries with my parents regarding their future parenting choices. When their daughter Sophia was born 2 months later, I became an aunt, despite my parents' objections. James sent photos and invited me to visit, making clear that his relationship with me was independent of our parents' approval. Holding my niece for the first time, I experienced a bittersweet joy family connection that existed despite, rather than because of our parents. My professional life continued its upward trajectory as the Return to Sender exhibition gained national attention. A museum in Chicago purchased the central installation piece for its permanent collection. A documentary filmmaker approached me about including my story in a project examining family estrangement among successful individuals. My online courses expanded to include workshops on using art for processing family trauma, attracting students from around the world. Most meaningful to me personally was establishing a scholarship fund for art students estranged from families. Using a portion of my increasing income, I created financial support for talented young artists who, like me, had lost family backing while pursuing their authentic creative paths. The fund provided not only financial assistance but mentorship and community, addressing the isolation that often accompanies family rejection. As months passed, I gradually found myself thinking less about the letter and my parents. Their attempt to re-enter my life solely for medical information had initially reopened old wounds, but ultimately accelerated my healing by removing any lingering illusions about potential reconciliation. Acceptance that they might never change brought an unexpected peace. Freedom from hope can sometimes be more liberating than hope itself. Family is who loves and accepts you became my personal mantra and the foundation of how I built relationships. Tyler, now completing his medical residency and planning to move to New York, embodied the truth that medicine and art were never actually opposing choices, but complementary paths of understanding human experience. Jasmine and my other close friends demonstrated that chosen family can provide deeper support than biological connections when those connections are based on conditions rather than acceptance. 1 year after receiving their letter, I stood in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, watching visitors engage with my work, now part of a special exhibition on contemporary approaches to human anatomy. Seeing diverse people find meaning in images born from my most painful experiences brought a profound sense of purpose. The rejection that once threatened to destroy me had ultimately helped create something meaningful for others. I realized then that my worth had never depended on my parents' approval. My path was valid, not because it eventually led to success by conventional standards, but because it allowed me to live authentically. The true measure of a life well lived isn't accolades or achievements, but alignment between inner truth and outer expression, something no family legacy or professional tradition can provide if it requires suppressing your essential self. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your authentic path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that choosing their own path is worth it, even when it comes with profound loss. Remember, the family that truly matters is the one that loves you exactly as you are. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to honor your truth, whatever it may be.